Hello everyone. Today we'll be taking a small course on Servlet for Spring framework. Servlets are really important if you want to go into detail of Spring framework because it's the underlying technology. Let's go through servlets. Okay, a servlet is a Java class that handle HTTP request and generate HTTP response. It is a part of Java EE Jakarta EE specification and is foundation of web application in Java. So think of servlet as a controller that receive request, process them, and return a response. Okay, a user hit this URL. If that URL matches to servlet, then servlet do get or do post method is invoked and servlet return a response. So at core of every Java web app, there is usually a servlet doing heavy lifting behind the scene. Okay, so now I present you a small example. Yes, I present you a small example. Okay, so suppose I have got one controller. Hmm, This is controller service repository. User. Okay, so here user made a request to the controller and request is forwarded. First of all, request is mapped to the appropriate controller method. Then request is forwarded to the appropriate service method, and if request is processed, it is possible that a request doesn't require to communicate with database, and it just processed and sent the response back to the controller method, or it might need to interact with database and then it send response back to the controller. Okay, so in both cases controller will receive the response from service. Okay, and then it will send response back to the client. Okay, it is also possible that request may not be forwarded to service, it might return the response directly to the client. There are certain cases. Okay, so anyway, send the request, user send the request to controller and user will receive the response. Okay, response could be in HTML format or JSON format. So yeah, so here we talk about servlet containers. So servlet cannot run by themselves, they need some kind of containers, so they are also known as web containers. For example, Apache Tomcat, or Jetty or Undertow. And for these containers, listen first of all. Okay, okay. These containers listen for HTTP request, then uh, dispatch them to appropriate servlet. This dispatching work is done by dispatcher servlet or front controller. That's what we discuss a bit, and we'll discuss just in few minutes. Okay, so it manages thread. So see, every request is a thread. Okay, so this is managed by thread pool and connection pooling. So that is quite out of the scope today, but just it is just for mentioning. Okay, so when you create a Spring Boot app, it auto configure embedded Tomcat server, which act as a servlet container. Okay, and in case you don't want to use you don't want to use embedded Tomcat, then you could just exclude Tomcat dependency from web, Spring Boot web, and you can just create a war file and deploy it in some other web container. Okay, so yeah, so let's discuss about Spring MVC. MVC stands for Module View Controller. Okay, so Spring MVC is built on top of Servlet API. Okay, so here how it relates to your Spring controller. Okay, Spring controller like REST annotation REST controller or annotation controller is actually registered as Servlet or dispatcher Servlet under the hood. Okay, dispatcher Servlet is a front controller in Spring MVC. Front controller. Okay, so it is just a specialized servlet that route request to your controller method based on annotation request mapping. So all this routing is done via request mapping annotation. Okay, so here servlet is equal to raw HTTP handler. Okay, dispatcher servlet is a smart router or Spring front controller. We'll discuss about the Spring front controller in the next slide. Okay, annotation REST controller is your business logic. It's your endpoint. Okay, it is basically an endpoint. Okay, so for example, I'll show you small code here. This is your REST controller. It is basically an endpoint. Okay, so this will be your endpoint. Okay. So if you go into detail of it, here is a request mapping queue. So get mapping is an alias of request mapping. Request method.get. Okay. So yes, if you are using Spring MVC, then you are definitely using servlets, even if indirectly. Okay, so now we will talk about front controller. Okay, so here our users send a request to the front controller. Front controller will forward delegate request to the appropriate controller method, and then that method will delegate the rendering of response, and then response will be returned to the client. Okay, and this all activities done on servlet engine, that could be Tomcat or some other web container. Okay, so what is the difference? What is different in Spring Boot 3? Spring Boot 3 runs on Jakarta EE10, which means package name for servlet API changed from JavaX to Jakarta.servlet or star. Your application must be compatible with Jakarta EE10. Spring Boot 3 still uses servlet under the hood. It uses Jakarta 6.0 API. Okay, if you are using libraries built for old, they won't work unless updated. Okay, so yes, understanding servlet really helps. You want to configure low level HTTP features, you are debugging issues, you are migrating older app to Spring Boot 3. So these are the key points in Spring Boot 3, and here we have got a summary. So servlet, what is servlet? Servlet is a Java class that handle request and response. Okay, what is a servlet container? Servlet container is a container in which servlet run and manage HTTP request, and there are some servlet containers like Jetty, Tomcat, and some more. And what is the Spring framework? Spring Spring excuse Spring MVC. Spring MVC is a framework built on top of Servlet API, uses dispatcher servlet. What is a dispatcher servlet? Dispatcher servlet is a servlet which delegate requests to the controller method actually. What is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is auto-configured servlet container and dispatcher servlet. If you are really junior developer, you might not experience too much with servlet, but as you go up in the ladder, you will certainly experience a lot of things inside servlet and other stuff, especially if you're dealing with some really internals of a Spring Boot. Okay, so Spring Boot 3 is like advanced version of a Spring Boot, and many things got changed in Spring Boot 3, and especially it uses Jakarta EE10. Why I'm telling Jakarta EE10? Because we are dealing with a servlet, so in this context it is using Jakarta EE10. So thank you very much for watching this video, and in case you like this video, you can subscribe my channel, and in the next video we will talk in detail about some core concepts of Spring Boot. I'll show you a little bit about it. Yeah, here, so we will discuss about IOC, dependency injection, types of dependency injection, and some qualifier, the bean life cycle, and yeah, why I created this small course before starting this module, because there are some concepts in Spring Boot which require understanding of servlets. That's the reason. Okay, so thank you again, and see you in the next lecture.